I began to appreciate what a great little place the territory of Hong Kong actually was, and even began to feel somewhat fortunate to be living there. After all, not everywhere in the world has terrain reaching elevations of 7, 8, even over 900 meters, within such easy reach of even the most thoroughly urbanized and densely populated areas. At elevations of over 500 meters, these views put the whole of Hong Kong into perspective, as a huge chunk of the territory was visible in one sweeping view. And yet, it wasn't just mountains that were never far away in Hong Kong. The sea was never far away either. There were over 200 islands in the territory, and ferries running between just about everywhere there was a need for them, ranging from 24-hour round-the-clock services leaving from Central to services that only ran a couple of times a week to the most remote islands. Far from there being nothing worth taking photos of in Hong Kong, there were more things than I could possibly afford the time, effort and money to capture on film. Any photographer can become obsessed with taking photos of only one subject, to the exclusion of all else. This is something that goes further than specializing in a particular subject, which is often guided only by commercial considerations. My first photographic obsession, which was certainly completely free of any commercial considerations, was relatively short-lived and came upon me almost unnoticed. My second photo with my new camera had been of the remains of the house next to my own. I discovered 2 other abandoned houses in the village that had gone to ruin and took several photos of both. Their demise seemed to say something about life in the rural New Territories. Only when actually closing in on the village did I realize what was wrong with it. There were no inhabitants. The first of the one-story stone and concrete constructions I saw, a little way to the left of the path and slightly removed from the main body of houses, was gradually being reclaimed by nature. To my utter surprise, there was a man standing at the edge of the village, and he seemed to be looking up at me. So there was someone living there. This time it startled me with its closeness before running out the door. I realized it had to have been right behind me in the room when I took the photo. I walked back out of the house, looked around, but there was nothing there. I swiftly turned to face the shadow in the corner of my eye, and the most remarkable thing happened. I came across 2 other villages in the Northern New Territories which had been completely abandoned, and several others with seriously depleted populations. But none were as eerie as the first. In addition to the 8 Immortals hike and regular hikes up Cloudy Hill, I had covered a number of other trails in the New Territories, and for the most part enjoyed both the hiking and the aerial views. But I also knew that sooner or later, as a now serious Hong Kong hiker, I would have to tackle the big one, the longest and most famous of all Hong Kong's many hiking trails. With a total length of 100 kilometers, the Maclehose Trail traverses the New Territories east to west. Beginning it in reverse with the less industrialized Sai Kung Peninsula waiting for me at the eastern end, I felt I would have more motivation to complete the trail. And I had already decided that this trail was one I just had to take, even though there would be no one I could boast to of having walked it. I just wanted the inner satisfaction of having hiked the trail in its entirety. Shortly after beginning my hike, I reached an open area providing a spectacular overview of a large part of western Hong Kong. I sat down on a rock in the warm morning sunshine. Much of Kowloon was visible, but the narrow part of Victoria Harbour between Kowloon and Hong Kong Island was a white haze, with the buildings of the island's northern waterfront merely a stylized shape seemingly floating in the mist. I looked on, my attention fully captured. A couple of minutes later I heard the sound again. This time I saw the airliner approaching from above Lantau, and taking a flight path from the right of my vision to the left, or from above Lantau Island to the east side of Kowloon, where Kai Tak International Airport was located. I saw the plane slowly fade from view into the mist above Kowloon, its engines becoming almost inaudible at the same time. Captivated by the scene, I was almost unable to continue on my way before I had witnessed 2 or 3 more planes follow the same trajectory. By the time Kai Tak became an airport of regular use for me, I had already flown into and/or out of about 30 international airports. So I knew Kai Tak to be unusual, but I began asking myself if it was perhaps more than merely unusual. After reading up on the airport, I began to feel very excited about the prospects of taking photos of it from further along my hike of the McLehose Trail, as I felt there had to be points at which the airport was visible. However, before I even hiked that section of the McLehose Trail, something happened that elevated Kai Tak Airport from merely something I had to get photos of to something I had to dedicate all my free time to. And the McLehose took second place on my list of photographic priorities. I knew this was something I absolutely had to get some photos of. Planes flying into Kai Tak would gradually begin to lose altitude, coming closer and closer to the densely packed buildings of Kowloon's urban heart, until it was possible to make out vehicles and even people. It was generally accepted in aviation that to abort the landing of a large aircraft like a jumbo jet, an altitude of over 200 meters was needed. That couldn't be done in the middle of a steep bank like a checkpoint, but by the time a plane landing at Kai Tak had leveled out for landing, its altitude would be less than that. In other words, if it was discovered at that point that the landing had to be aborted, it would be too late.